Y'all got scared there for a bit, didn't you? Don't lie. It's past 7 on a Monday afternoon, so you know what time it is. Time for your weekly episode of SCV CHAT. Before we get started, please remember the views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV. It's GEC, Northern Division Brigade Camp Setup Subsidiaries. How is everybody doing in Dixieland tonight? We have a good show for you planned here with Past Commander-in-Chief Jason Boshers. T-Rex, or some of you might know him as my father. But happy St. Patrick's Day. I got my green on. It looks like Jason has his green on. So we're good to go. I struggled to find something green in my house for way too long that wasn't camo. Way too long. But here we are. I only wear this hat during basketball season, and yet I couldn't find it. It took me a while, but after I found it, I was very happy. But yeah, my apologies for the late start. Jason had to shave and look pretty in the mirror, and then of course I was coming in hot on two wheels, leaving straight from work to here. I mean, quick. So I'm messing. Jason was ready to go. I was not. I was hoping I could beat him on, but he texts me, hey, I'm on. I see everything. Kentucky Division Commander Kyle Thompson is early simply because we are 10 minutes behind schedule. That's that. Commander Thompson is a real opponent for the Thomas Franklin Award. Someone who shows up late occasionally. I guess I could also qualify for it, but I'm one of the people that pick who gets the award, so I'm not going to give it to myself. I don't want to look bad, so I'll give it to you, Commander. You going to be at Division Reunion. I'll force it upon you. No one really wants the Thomas Franklin Award, but it's not late. It's time with style.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I thought everybody wanted the Thomas Franklin Award, you know. I mean, who doesn't want a warm can of Spam, you know?
Super glue to a piece of
paper
plate.
Yes. You know, one of those that you cook from the inside of a car when you leave it on the dash, you know?
Oh,
that good kind.
that good kind. I wonder. I gotta check who won it last year. Let's look at this real quick. I can't remember who we gave it to. Oh, poor Chuck.
Oh man,
Thomas Franklin doesn't even want it. Fun fact: we gave that to Past Commander Chuck McMichael because we asked him to come to the awards ceremony for SCV Chat, and he was on the other side of the room talking and didn't hear us, and so we gave it to him in that split decision. So he got a nice can of Spam for his troubles. Yes. But it's good to see everybody. Good to see you, Camp 1765. Good to see you in the chat, David Pope, of course, the Lone Ranger, Chuck McMichael in the chat, Past Commander-in-Chief. Past Commander-in-Chief, the most sharp-dressed man in the SCV, Paul Gramlin Jr. Richard Garcia in the chat. Good to see you, sir. Smiley. I got a Mississippi Division member in the chat tonight. Look at y'all go. Good to see you, Smiley. And the Florida man. Good to see you. Al, good to see you. And Ryan Rogers of Camp 1824. Good to see everybody. Oh, that's right. You got Veneta sausages.
Yes.
They're out of Spam.
Yeah. First time I've never known them to, carry Spam down at the local 7-Eleven,
No, I mean, it was a shock for us, that's for sure. We didn't see that coming, but I actually like the sausages more than Spam. So I actually got 2 of them sausage cans. I ate one. And we gave the other one to Past Commander-in-Chief Chuck Michael.
No, very fitting.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Jason got the Let Your Light Shine award.
Oh, yes. Plays that song, This Little Light of Mine, Yes.
We had a great time designing Jason's awards. It was a great day. We spent a whole afternoon doing Jason's. But it's good to see everybody.
Yes, it is.
Happy St. Patrick's Day to the Army of Tennessee Commander Carl Jones. I'm not even reading that comment, Carl. Faversham. That Faversham, y'all. That's Gaelic.
That's Gaelic.
Gaelic for Faversham, y'all.
Faversham, y'all. That's Gaelic for Faversham, y'all.
That's a T-shirt. That's a new T-shirt right there,
yes.
boys.
Yes.
All right. We have some more. You got Mr. Blackstone in the chat from Camp 2140 in Mississippi. Yeah, Mississippi. Look at y'all. Thank y'all.
Yeah, Mississippi's been they're there tonight.
Yeah, we got some good Mississippi boys in the chat. But speaking of the website, it might be a while since anybody has checked it out. So we'll pull it up for a minute, talk about that. Let me find it. There we go. Of course, this is our homepage. Of course, scvchat.com. Got a nice little welcome video for you. And our video of the month, which is about to be replaced. So make sure to go check out our video of the month. But something I wanted to show y'all, 2 things. The events page. I need y'all's help with that. So go sign in, make an account if you're not a member of scvchat.com, and check it out. I don't know what we have done to offend Past Commander-in-Chief Chuck McMichael. Not putting that one on the screen. Gonna get me in trouble with my sponsors, Commander. But help us out with the events page. You'll see why when we get there. I want every Confederate event that's an annual event to be put on our calendar. I need y'all's help with that, though. I can put the Mississippi ones, but I need help to get that. So please go check that out. Of course, we have a lot of things. Of course, we were talking about the SCV Chat Awards, the prestigious Crawl Spatula Award, along with the Chat Head of the Year. And, of course, a couple other ones, Rare Frop Award, Hearth and Home Award. Actually, there was a fight over the Hearth and Home Award a couple of years ago. A darn right fight where we almost lost Commander Boshers. His life flashed before his eyes, actually.
Sure did. That's still a terrifying moment. I'll think of it every now and then.
Just keeps you awake.
Yes, it's that nightmare that never goes away. Now, I see that we still have the Son of Harold Philpott Guest of the Year award. I'm still trying to get back in touch with Son.
The Son.
Now, yeah, that's all I know to call him now. I'm still trying to get back in touch with him. We've missed each other a time or two. I'd love to get him back on. Yeah, and because I don't know that he ever made it on that last time.
We've tried to have him on 2 times.
Yes,
and one time is where we got the infamous Pop-Tart break where he called me and he was having trouble logging in with his computer. And so I was behind the scenes. You can go back and look at that episode off and on trying to get in contact with him. And then you can see me get a phone call. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir? And I mean, that sir came up, he was like, well, it's 7:35. At 7:35 every day, I stop and eat a Pop-Tart. So I'm not going to be on tonight because I have to eat the
Yes.
Pop-Tart.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm not one to cause conflict. I was like, okay, yes, sir.
Yeah. And then there was another time as he was coming on, he got cut off.
Yeah, no, he was late. And
Yes.
we decided to end the episode early. And so he pops on and I hit in stream.
Yes. I mean, he comes as he's ready to come on and he gets introduced, we go down. You know, that was I hated that for him. I mean, and he was a great Southern gentleman about it. He wasn't angry or anything like that. You know, he was actually quite apologetic of everything that was that has happened. And I just want to make sure that we do what we can to get him on. And when I looked up and I saw that Son of Harold Philpott Guest of the Year award, I think that is a very good one. Now, Thomas Franklin, I have met. I had my picture made with him, gave me a can of Annis. And, it's just, Thomas Franklin, I mean, he's been up there at Elm Springs. We showed up one time and he was there sitting on the curb, but he showed up on Sunday for an event that happened the day before. You know, he thought it was Sunday when it was happening. And no, I'm wrong. That's my fault. He had his weeks wrong. See, he was coming up there to go in the museum, and he was up there on a Saturday, but we had, it was the Saturday before that the museum was open. So, yeah. And so I'm glad you're doing those. Yes. I can't hear you.
I muted my mic so I wouldn't mess up because I had to copy and paste something real quick.
Yeah.
Carl has a great idea. And for those who don't know, let me pull it back up. I think, the Rare Frop medallion is given to the member of the SCV chat community that is captain of the struggle bus, but they rare fropped through it. And we did lose a great person, a great guest that we had on a while ago in Rock.
Yeah.
And so I've made the executive decision. We have followed Carl's proposal. And after the episode, we'll officially end the show and go edit that and name that officially after Rock, who was a great man and a great Southern gentleman. And he will deeply be missed. And so, that was a great idea, Carl, and we'll do that. So, we have a couple awards, as you can see. The Guest of the Year, Hearth and Home, again. Poor Jason's life flashed before his eyes on that one.
Yes.
Which I think we already know who's going to be the Hot Spot of the Year award, the Best Emergency Guest. Poor Michael C. Hardy. Let us all take a moment for the man who got less than an hour to come on and get ready.
Well, you about did me that way today.
I didn't. I gave you more than an hour though. What time?
Yeah, you did. It was I don't know, about 4:30 or 5 when you did it. So I had about 2.5 hours to prepare.
Yeah, it was 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
I'm notorious, so I forgot it was St. Patrick's Day. I'm not even gonna lie. I'd been at my farm all day, and I go to town to get lunch, and someone just comes up and pinches me, and it was someone from my class that I graduated high school with, and I was like, "Oh, hey, thanks. That's a weird introduction." And they were like, "Well, you always pinched us in high school," and it still hadn't dawned on me. I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, it's St. Patrick's Day, and you're not wearing green. I was like, holy crap. So I immediately text Jason. As you can tell, I ate a very late lunch. I skipped lunch today. Basically ate a late supper or early supper. I text Jason immediately. I was like, so you know anybody to talk on this topic? And he was like, well, I've done one. I was like, hey, you have volunteered. That was the wrong sentence to say to me. But we do have our next week scheduled speaker, our next guest. Bless his heart. I also called him asking for help. So he'll be on next week, and we'll talk more about that towards the end. Is it true that Thomas Franklin is over 6 feet tall, but only wears 5.5 shoes?
When he come up and he introduced himself to me, of course, I recognized him right off with the whiskers. When he came up and to me, yes, he's quite a large individual. But where and I did not pay any attention to the size of his feet at all.
No,
you know, so I don't know because he was tall until he started to walk away. Now, when he started to walk away, it looked like he was wearing like 6-inch tall platform boots. You know, so I couldn't tell you exactly how tall he is. You know, but he's a pretty good size old fella. I'll tell you that right now. He's not somebody I'd want to tassel with and by any stretch of the imagination. But he did look like he was, you know, had the big 6-inch tall boots that he was walking away in. So, but I didn't look down to see how size of his feet. I was because when he talks to you, he's real close.
Oh gosh,
yeah. He doesn't, you know, stand back, and he walks right up to you and he bumps you. You know, is when he stops. He stops when he hits you, and then he's looking down at me, talking to me. So I spent my whole time going, yes, sir, and looking up at him and trying to figure out what he had in his beard. Because he was obviously had eaten recently and he had a stuff still stuck in his beard. And he was a very nice man. Very nice, very polite. But it's, you know, so I can't tell you if he was a 5.5 shoe, but it did look like he was wearing 6-inch boots, the Frankenstein looking kind of boots.
Huh. I haven't seen him. I've talked to him. We've tried to get him on the show a couple times.
Well, he has been on it, hasn't he?
He has, but he got upset, and we worked it out. You can go back and check the episode out. He has a rule that he will not be on the show if there are any past Commander-in-Chiefs on the show.
Yes. Yes. And he's made that clear.
He's made that very clear. He does not like it. It was the night that you and Commander McClooney were announcing something for the Forest
yes.
reinterment.
Yes.
And that was supposed to be his episode. He was going to come talk. And he sat there for a while, sat there, even started cleaning his gun, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And then finally just left.
Yes.
And we've talked since then about him coming on, but he's been very cautious. He wants to make sure we have a cleared schedule. And I think he said that he'll wait until after a certain event in the near future happens. He'll think about coming back on.
Yes. And I hope he does. He's a good guy.
He's really a good guy. I would love for him to come on sometime in April, but we haven't been able to get him on, and I haven't seen him in person since the Georgia reunion. Because remember, he showed up late.
Yes.
This was for your election.
Yes.
But thought that he showed up early and rented his room for that week and the week after because he thought the reunion was a week later. So he did try to vote for you, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, he said he was going to, yes.
Yeah, I think he tried to vote for you, but didn't realize that we had adjourned about a week prior.
Yes.
And he just kind of, after he figured out, he called Connor. And Connor was like, hey, dude, the reunion was over. It was last week. Mm-hmm. So he just spent the rest of his time in Georgia. And I think he went to Stone Mountain. And
Yes.
towards some of them. I mean, he made the best of it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I would have been mad, but Connor said he was like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah, it didn't. I talked to him since then, and he definitely was not even the least bit upset about it. He just rolled with the punches. He's a good laid back guy, but when he commits to doing something, he's a guy that's committed all in.
Oh yeah,
and that's the reason why when you tell him you want him to come on and talk, he's going to come on and he's going to talk. And and so he got upset about that. And I've talked to him, and I can tell it still bothers him. And it's like, well, I just don't want y'all on. I'll come on, but I just don't want to be on there if y'all are going to be on there. And I respect him for that, because he would be a good one.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't hold anything against him. I understand, but
yes.
Yeah, bless his heart. I haven't seen him in forever. But going back to the rest of the awards, we have, of course, the Moose Chalice. And I don't remember who made the requirements in the description for this award, but the Moose Chalice Award is bestowed upon an individual who's demonstrated unparalleled prowess in ancient art of moose whispering. This prestigious accolade is granted to those who have exhibited extraordinary, finesse in convincing moose to engage in whimsical acts such as choreographed dance routines or dramatic readings of Shakespeare
sonnets
or rap lyrics. There's a reason that award has been only given once. Then, of course, the Hot Spot Award, Best Emergency Guest. Thomas Franklin, Let Your Light, the last to come on the episode the most. The Let Your Light Shine Award. Chat Head, who is a shining example to all leading the calls. And the next qualification, very important, has to look good standing next to rocks. And, of course, the Brotherly Love Award. And the only description we have for that is roar means I love you in dinosaur. I forgot about that 100%.
So today is St. Patrick's Day.
Today is St. Patrick's Day. And let's go ahead and get into everything. But real quick, if you hit the Support Us tab,
yes,
go to our Patreon link. Just click this button right here. And for $10 a month, you can help us stay on the air. And, of course, our SCV Chat T-shirts. So, I mean, click on the T-shirt you want, and you'll be taken there to buy it. We have this lovely Patrick Cleburne shirt today that you can get in St. Patrick's Day green that says, I'm with the South in life or death, in victory or defeat. So make sure you go check out our store today and get your Patrick Cleburne shirt. So we are going to get off the website now, though, because me and Jason both started talking about Thomas Franklin for a while. So let us get into tonight's topic. Or do you want to take a quick commercial break and jump back, and you got the rest of the time?
Well, it's 7:33 here in Confederate time. So if I know talking about him and his 7:35 Pop-Tart break, right now he'd be planning on getting up and going to get his Pop-Tart. And, and he didn't just stick them in the microwave or put them in the toaster. He put them in a pan on the stove, and that's how he warms up his Pop-Tarts. So, and thinking about him, let's just go ahead and take our break.
All right, let's go ahead.
There is a place nestled in the rolling farmland of southern Middle Tennessee, A home constructed in 1837, nearly lost to the ravages of war. Saved by a servant and a Confederate general. A place where families loved and lost. If walls could talk, what stories could be told? If a place, a home, can feel love, loss, pain, surely this is one of those places. Nearby is a more recent structure, and inside are the stories of heroes and heroines, stories of battles won and lost, stories of sacrifices made by the people of its native soil. A place that will tell the true and complete story of the Southland and the war fought for its freedom. From the causes that led to the conflict to the modern-day struggles to protect Southern history. Historic Elm Springs and the Confederate Museum at Elm Springs are the general headquarters for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. A place where the story of the Southland and its historic struggle is preserved and told. Come and discover your history.
Goosebumps every time.
Yeah. I found that original script when I was going through some stuff. You know, I wrote it back when I was LT. And, you know, I've already taken and given some stuff to Adam. And that's probably going to be one of those things I go ahead and get it and, you know, give it over to him, because it was part of it's handwritten and then part of it I typed on, you know, so, you know, typed it up, wrote it up first, then typed it up, then went back and scratched on it some more, trying to get the right words in there. But I think I'm going to go ahead and turn all that over to Adam. I've already dropped some stuff off for him. You know, but let's talk about old Pat. 197 years ago today, Patrick Ronan Cleburne, or Clyburn, or Claiborne, came into this world. He was the third son of a very prominent family, and I didn't know this till you get to studying on him. It was a very prominent middle to upper class family. His father was a doctor. And if you go back through his history and you look at his ancestors, he's descended of knights. He had some knights in his family. They fought they were called the Knights of Westmoreland. And they have their manor or hall or home there is still standing. It was built in the mid 1400s, and it was called Clybourne, Cliburn. And I've talked to several people over the years trying to, well, how do you exactly pronounce the name? Because it has a lot of spellings, and when you start looking over the history of it, it's a lot more. I mean, it is, you know, the Coliburn, Coleburn, Coleburne. It's Claiborn. I mean, there's all of these, and some of the descendants of that family spell it in many different ways. And that I come across that very early in my life with two aunts, my mama's two sisters. We would go up right north of me, 4 miles north of me, is St. John's Church. St. John's Church was built. It's a very unique church. It's still there. It was built by the Pope family for the Pope family to attend church there. It is an Episcopal church. And yes, Leonidas, or Leonidas, however you want to say it, he preached there. And throughout the war, there is a tie between those Pokes, and Patrick Cleburne. But my aunts, when we'd go up through there, they'd get in an argument. Is it Cleburne or Cleburne? And one time we was going down, and David Pope is correct. If you look at a pronunciation, it is Claiborne. That is the way that it is normally is done. But there are those that will argue that. But I think, and he's mentioned it of Irvin S. Buck, and Irvin S. Buck served with Cleburne. And if he says it's that, he says a man he worked with, 4 years of the war, 3 years of the war. So it's an interesting story. But my aunts would be going up and down go past there, and they'd get in an argument over it. And one time, you're talking in the mid 70s, and in the back of an old Chevrolet car, no seat belts, 3 kids bouncing around everywhere, and drove past one time, and the gate was open. And my Aunt Dorothy was driving, and she just spun it around in the road and come back and went in there and asked the man, we're going to find out how to pronounce this, Cleburne or Cleburne. And the man said that he didn't rightly know. Of course, that greatly angered both my aunts because they were dead set on proving each other wrong. And so he did say, okay, you can go to the Carter House in Franklin. And that was where he was killed. And took us to a spot where they think, because I'll go ahead and tell you, since we're talking about St. John's Church, Pat Cleburne, when the Army was coming back into Tennessee after the Atlanta campaign, and they were coming back to go to Franklin, and he passed by St. John's Church, and he said the words there that it would be worth dying to be buried there, because Cleburne was a religious man, and he was an Episcopalian as well. And he made that comment. So when he got killed at Franklin, he was temporarily interred there at St. John's Church. And the man that was there, they were there working on some of the tombstones. And he said, well, this was because there's still some Confederates that are buried there. And they're saying that Cleburne was buried here. So he was moved in 1870s, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. He was moved in 1870, I should say. So my aunt guy said, but what you need to do is you need to go to Franklin, and you need to talk to the men up there. They'll be able to tell you. Well, they wasn't a whole lot of help either. But at this point in time, you're talking mid 70s. They said it was pretty, one of them said it's pretty much all of them. And then I've talked to several people from that area of Ireland. He was born in Cork County, Ireland. And they always say the same thing. It depends on who's saying it, and which area you're from. But never got a good deal on it. But I think the general pronunciation here in the U.S. is Cleburne. So born 197 years ago today, upper middle class family. He held himself to a very high standard from a very early age. One thing I did find out about him was he was quite a shy individual. He was very much an introvert. Once he got to know you, he played a lot of pranks on people. And he had and you find that later on in the war with some of the things that he did with his men, that he was a very playful gentleman. And so another date to remember that comes up is Christmas Day of 1849. That is the day that a ship sailed into New Orleans, and it had Patrick, his brother William, and a sister. And they arrived here Christmas Day of 1849. Now, where they had got to that point where it had come from to where he was with this point, that he wanted to become a doctor and follow in his father's footsteps. But you had to know French, you had to know Latin, you had to know Greek. And that was the first time he was bad at those subjects, and he failed. And he was 18 years old and he failed these. And he held himself to such a high standard that he felt like he could not face his family anymore. So he left. Didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell his family. Didn't tell his friends. It took him over a year to find out what happened to him. He just went missing. But where he went and he joined the military, and he joined the 41st Foot, which means he joined in the infantry. And he served as an infantryman for 3 years. Now, during that time, they had the Irish potato famine that happened. And of course, they had to guard food supplies. And that was one of the things that he was sent to do, was to guard food supplies. But he was always training. He was always trained during that time, being trained. And that passed on to the military career that he had here. But when his service ended, and he bought out the remaining end part of his service, and he come here as a 21-year-old, Christmas Day, 1849. Now, he was not a very patient individual, because at that time, you pretty much, if you wanted to get a job or something like that, you had to be introduced by somebody. And think of it like this. You could walk up to somebody, introduce yourself, try to get a job, and you might not have any luck at all. But if you had somebody introduce you, somebody that was a well thought of in the community, that could take you to somebody and introduce and say, okay, this is Harrison Dawes. He's a very good friend of mine. And what that is telling this man, okay, you can trust him. I'm speaking for him. I'm vouching for him. Well, he wouldn't wait. He immediately light a shuck, and he just went up the Mississippi River, and he settled in Cincinnati. And he started to work there at a drugstore. And, he got an introduction there, and he got to end up meeting some people. And they asked him if he would be willing to go to Helena or Helena, because I called it Helena one time, and somebody spoke up and said, it's Helena. And I asked them, why is that, after the talk? And they said, well, I'm from there. And then there was somebody else that was from there, and they said it was Helena. So I'll let people argue that out. But he got asked to go, would he be interested in going there? And he did. And he started to work. And then about 6 months' time, or a little less than a year's time, he ended up buying half interest in it. He bought half of the interest in this in this drugstore pharmacy, and it was named Nash and Cleburne. And during that time, he was meeting all these other people, and he was a Mason. He joined several societies. He was getting to where he was becoming very prominent in the town. And then in 1855, there was a yellow fever epidemic that went through Helena. And this yellow fever epidemic, Cleburne didn't leave town. He stayed there, and he administered to the people that were there, and he helped take care of all of these sick people that were in Helena. And from that, it just blossomed. People got to really thanking him, really appreciating him. He was extremely well thought of. He was a pillar of the community. And right before all of that happened, I had another man approach him, and he goes, would you be interested in becoming a lawyer? Because what they had, there were several big law firms there, and they were interested in starting a small one that was just pretty much deal with land transfers, because there was a lot of property being bought and sold and developed at that time. And so he studied law, and he became an attorney. So he was a druggist. He was an attorney. He was very prominent in his community. There was a dispute that come up during one of the land transfers. And during this dispute, this man threatened the friend that Patrick Cleburne was representing, and threatened Patrick Cleburne as well. And one day he was walking past the store, and there was a gentleman. This gentleman stepped out from behind him and shot him in the back. And he turned and pulled his pistol and turned and killed the man, shot and killed the man. Now, don't know if when he was in the 41st Foot Army, if he killed anybody during that time, because they did drill a lot, but they also had to do quite a bit of guard work. But we do know that's the first person that I know of that he killed, but it was in self-defense because the man shot him in the back. And it was just defending his friend. Then, like I said, we had the yellow fever epidemic, and then you start to have the drums of war being sounded in 1860. Everything that I've read concerning him was that he believed in the right of secession, and he believed the right of self-government and small government and keeping out of each other's business. He believed in what our founding fathers really had in mind when they formed this nation. He believed in that. He didn't like the fact of them coming in and telling people what they could or couldn't do. He believed in his right as a human being, as one of God's creatures. He believed in his God-given rights. And he felt that all of these were being run over by the current federal government. So what he did was he joined, and they became the Yale Rifles. And it was named after Colonel Archibald Yale, Yell, who was killed in the Mexican War at a charge in Buena Vista. So they were called the Yale County, or the Yale Rifles, not Yale County. They were called the Yale Rifles. And they were the first group to offer their service to Arkansas. And they were the 15th Arkansas, was what he was rode into. And they spent a lot of time going back and forth. In Kentucky, they reported to Mound City. They bounced between there and Bowling Green. And that's when you really start to see this high sense of duty of what Cleburne has, because he had, when they were rode into the 15th Arkansas, he was made their colonel. He had been a captain in the Yale Rifles. He is now their colonel. So, and he's drilling the men. He's training the men. Well, they're making all of these trips, and they're near Montfordville, and they were doing road repairs. And they had some civilians that were helping them. And they had worked all day. Cleburne had given some orders, and he was sitting down that night to, get some sleep. And his adjutant, for lack of a better term, was writing up the orders. And one of these civilians was a sleepwalker and didn't tell anybody. And during that night, he come busting in to their room, and he knocked the clerk down. Cleburne pulled a pistol and killed him. And that was one of the things that people said that he would get very depressed about, and he would get very moody about, and he deeply regretted what happened. But if you think about it in its pure sense, this is wartime. You're in occupied territory. Somebody comes busting into the room and takes out the other person in the room with you. What are you going to do? You're going to kill him. Now, he didn't know this man was a sleepwalker. The man didn't tell anybody. It was just a horrible, horrible accident. And it bothered Cleburne for the rest of his life. And he got very moody every time the subject ever come up. And then you start to get this real high sense of how he conducted himself and his duties, because they were doing all of these repairs, and they were moving, and he gets approached. He was knowledgeable of the attempts of the English crown to forcibly inflict consolidated. Yes. That is the reason why Carl Jones is Carl Jones. Yes, Carl, you are correct. He had already experienced that. He knew what that was like. But they were moving, and they were told that, if you find the Federals, if you come across them, if it's not too big a force to attack, if it's too big a force, get word back to us. We'll mass more men and we'll go after them. Well, they started hitting these towns, and there's no Federals there. What the Federals had done was they had poisoned the well. They had told all of the people in up and down these roads in Kentucky that when the Confederates show up, the Confederates are going to kill you. They're going to take all of your possessions. What they can't take, they're going to burn. So they were spreading the typical Federal propaganda of what the Confederates want to do, but that's what the Federals were doing. It's one of those things, you get accused of doing stuff, they'll accuse somebody else of doing it when they're the ones that are doing it. So he had to face all of that with them. Well, what he did was anytime that his men moved and they found something, they would take it to a nearby house, leave it on the porch, and write on there that it was returned by a Confederate soldier. And they showed how Confederates should act and were going to act. Wonderful thing. Well, you have this little thing, Fort Henry, Fort Donelson, they fall. They're moved to Nashville. They just pretty much blow straight through Nashville. They're looking for men, recruiting, trying to get enough men. They go to Murfreesboro, and then they go from Murfreesboro to go down to Corinth. So you're talking this time, March of 62. And then, as you know, the Federals decide they're going to do something, and the Confederates come out of Corinth, and they meet at a little place called Shiloh Church. And they had a good little scrap there. His men fought very well. They took some prisoners on the first day. They took a stand of arms, but they suffered very bad losses. His men really took a beating in that, although but this started something that continued with them all the way through the war. And that was that no matter what happened, we only had so many soldiers. And the Federal armies were keep getting resupplied. And there were only so many that the Confederates could get, so only so many. So they would start, and let's just say that it was the line in front of them, and it was, 5,000 Confederates and 7,500 Federals. Confederates take casualties. The Confederates kill more, but when the Federals get resupplied, it's now 4,000 against 8,000. So this would start where they'd start to stretch their lines too thin, and they would just get pinched in from the sides. And they would generally always have to, a lot of times they ended up having to give up the field, even though they repulsed every charge and they accomplished their charge. They would end up having to leave the field because they ended up being outmanned. This starts that chain of events. But if you go to Shiloh, and I encourage everybody to go, and you can go to the mass graves, I'm going to ask you to consider going to see two monuments there. And one of them is the one for Mississippi, which is just a beautiful monument there. And then there is the one for the Tennessee, for Tennessee. And Cleburne is quoted on there by a soldier from the 23rd Tennessee. And they said, and on there, the quote, and I might miss a word or two here and there, but the quote is that the Tennesseans fought hard. They had everything to fight for because they were fighting for their homes and their firesides. And, that is on the Tennessee Monument. It was, I think about it, it is a Tennessee monument with the 23rd Tennessee being quoted on there. and it's a man from Arkansas that is doing the talking. They retreat out of that, as we all know the story, and they decide that they're going to go back into Kentucky, and they end up going east of Nashville as they circle back through. They come back through the Decatur and go up. They probably come through somewhere. I believe they come through around the Carthage area. Some people have said it's somewhere between Carthage and Cookeville, but they pass through there and they go into Kentucky. And they have this fight going on in Richmond, Kentucky. And Cleburne had given some orders. You heard me mention the Polk family earlier. And this is where he had a Polk fighting under him, Colonel Lucius Polk. Now, that is the brother of Leonidas. Now, Lucius is from the Mount Pleasant area, just 4 miles from me. The house that they have was right across from St. John's Church. It was struck by lightning in the early part of the 1900s and burned to the ground. Confederates camped on that site. Confederates drilled on that site. But Colonel Lucius Polk had been wounded, and he is on a gurney and he's being carried by. And Cleburne is on horseback, and he leans down to talk to Lucius Polk, and a bullet goes through the left side of his face, takes out teeth, gums, tongue, and comes right out his mouth. Now, I can't imagine what Lucius Polk saw with that or what anybody was thinking. But to be hit like that, just goes straight through and out his mouth. And just a little while, he's unable to stay on the field. He can't talk. He's got serious problem going on. He leaves the field. The orders that he had given that day were the ones, those orders won the battle. And he was promoted to a major general. I believe it was a major general, might have been a brigadier at that time, but he got promoted at that time. It was a brigadier, and that was he got promoted the next year into brigadier. So he was promoted, but he had to convalesce there in somebody's home, and they took very good care of him. So he was able to rejoin his men in a short period of time at Perryville. Now, he was on horseback. Now, his favorite horse throughout the entire war, the horse's name was Red. Okay. Now, that's what Cleburne rode when he was just in general correspondence. If he was going into battle, he would take Red to the back and get on a secondary horse. So Red was never on the field in any of these charges, because Cleburne was always a guy, he was like Forrest and so many of the men at that time. They were in the fight. They weren't way in the back giving orders. They were out front, in with the men, and you'll find that out in just a little bit. So he's on the horse, cannonball comes through, kills the horse, wounds Cleburne's leg. Cleburne stays in the saddle, gets him another horse, stays in the saddle, and stays on the field for the remainder of the day. And what happened during the night was Perryville was one of the largest Confederate victories, especially here in the Army of Tennessee, because it was all these artillery pieces, 1 million rounds of ammo, thousands of guns, 2,000 horses, 1,700 mules, and all of these wagons. But the roads were muddy, the roads were junk. They had gotten bogged down in all of this mess, and they were ordered to burn the wagons and to burn the supplies to keep the Federals from getting them, because the Federals had their cavalry had come in and they were fighting to retake that back. Cleburne, even being wounded, said he got permission, got enough men together, picked up some stragglers, and put men on each wheel on the wagon. They got everybody out of there. Then they saved the supply train. And that was Cleburne coming back and doing that. Are you okay, Moose? I see you looking at something. Do you want to say something?
Oh, no, Commander, you go ahead. You're doing great. I'm just working behind the scenes a bit while you were talking.
Okay. Whatever you like to do. Okay.
Yeah, no, you're doing great.
Okay. But if there was something you want to add in or got something to say, just chime in. This isn't a one-man show by any means.
Oh, no, sir. I'm learning a lot tonight. I've looked up to Patrick Cleburne for a while, but haven't really studied his history. So you're telling me a lot tonight. I'm loving this.
Well, he's and remember this, I knew Cleburne before I knew Forrest. Now I had heard of Bobby Lee, so I'd actually heard of Robert E. Lee, the marble model, and studied a little bit on that. But, Cleburne was my first hero in all of this. And I'll go ahead and jump ship for a moment on this. One of the greatest honors that has happened to me was when I got asked to speak at his gravesite. And that was just to be there on Maple Hill, the Confederate area of it on top of the hill. And there's a Confederate monument. There's all these Confederate graves. And over here is the obelisk for Patrick Ronan Cleburne. And, and just to be there, because I had these ideas in my thing that I was going to say, but, what do you say to talk about Cleburne to people who already knew Cleburne? What do you say to people like that? And I come up on the hill and I see it and I'm walking around it and I see that phrase, dulce et decorum est pros materia more, which is Latin for it is sweet and fitting to die for one's land. And I'm going, okay, that's what I want to talk about. I had all this stuff in my head and then I go, okay, that kind of changes things because that's, I've heard it, I've read it. And when you see how he lived his life, it is sweet and fitting to die for one's land. That was, yes, he was born in Cork County, Ireland. He was an adopted son of the United States and really Helena, Arkansas. I mean, they adopted him. He was their son. And he considered himself a son of Arkansas. He really believed in the states' rights issues on this. And that was just, how do you, But anyway, that, I didn't mean jump ship on that. But, that was very humbling. And, of course, I can't hardly talk about it without thinking about my aunts, and the family impact because they knew it. And, this was something that I'd been taught from a young boy, I should say. He'd saved the supplies there in Richmond. Okay, they come back through Tennessee, and then they hit Murfreesboro. And they have the battle there at Murfreesboro. And, again, his men fight very well there. They're always well trained and they're always very strong. So you're talking end of December, beginning of January, going from 62 into 63. And then they start what I'm going to call the Tullahoma campaign. And that is where they pretty much leave Murfreesboro and they make it down to outside Tullahoma and Winchester, making their way on toward Chattanooga. And some things happened during that time. Braxton Bragg was entrench, retreat. He would not to make a stand and fight. He always said the land there wasn't favorable for a fight. So he never made one. And it got so bad that you find out that the federal leaders in the Army are angry at Rosecrans because Rosecrans was the federal commander that was in charge of that because there wasn't a body count. because Braxton Bragg wouldn't stay and fight. Needless to say, the Federals just pretty much walked into Chattanooga without any issues. Then you have, first time they really get into a scuff again is going to be in Chickamauga and at Lookout Mountain. And again, they fought so well, you know. And if you go to Resaca, there is a monument to Cleburne there at Resaca. And that is because when they broke the line, his men broke the line, they chased the Federals over a mile across that field and just whooped up on them bad, you know. So in Resaca, you can go there, and I've had my picture made. How can you not? You know, I've had my picture made with the Cleburne statue there. He's got, you know, his arm on his knee and his leg up. It's very, very nice. But that's how his men fought. But again, they were starting to deal with all that. Now you go from leaving Chattanooga and Lookout Mountain, leaving you know, Chickamauga and Lookout Mountain, then you start what we call the Atlanta campaign. And we all know what the Atlanta campaign was. I mean, it was, he just pretty much, Sherman, I call it giving the Heisman, you know. What he had done was he had gone and Sherman had developed his own total scorched earth battles that he wanted to his mindset. He was be persuaded to turn and go into Alabama, and because Alabama was the breadbasket for the Army of Tennessee, and he was encouraged to go there and do that. But he believed in a total annihilation, so he went to a little town called Galeyville and an area around there, and just lived off the land. And he kept giving all of these reports, and they just wiped out Galeyville to the point that they had some of the ladies coming to them, asking them to leave them something because they had taken everything and they were eating everything. And they said that Sherman, they actually met with Sherman, two ladies did, very prominent ladies in the town, and they asked to please leave them something. And he said, there will not even be a grasshopper when we leave here. And with what he did there, he had convinced, by writing all this stuff and communicating back with DC, he had convinced them to go for his total warfare. And that is the reason why he did not go into Alabama, but instead went around Atlanta and then just went on a mile-wide destruction path from there all the way to the ocean. And it just, but until he got to that point, he was still having to fight there. I'm going to go and tell you a little study. This is how close it comes between the Polk family and Cleburne. Pine Mountain, Georgia. They were one of the few. Cleburne always stayed with his men, but he needed to go see this because if you've ever been around and you go to there, you're fighting on hills, you're fighting on Kennesaw Mountain, you're fighting on Pine Mountain, and you're looking at, he goes there to see what he's facing, and he gets to the top of the hill, and as he gets up there, he gets towed. There's a federal battery, 1.5 miles away. They've got the range in. You need to be real careful. But he's bound and determined to take a look. So he gets to the top of the hill. As he gets to the top of the hill, a shell passes just a few feet over his head. And he makes a statement, and he tells the aide that is with him that he has never known a time when he was somewhere he didn't need to be, that something bad didn't happen. Let's leave. Okay. And the aide agreed with him, and they left. The next day, Leonidas Polk is up there walking around. Shell comes through him, nearly cuts him completely in two. Goes into the tree, explodes. Of course, he's dead. Well, that's another time. The day before Cleburne left, Leonidas stayed. And but that was the same Leonidas that preached there at St. John's Church. So, that's one of those tie-ins to the Polk family and to Pat Cleburne. Well, we all know what happens with Atlanta. Confederate Army moves back to Lovejoy. They stay in Lovejoy a little bit. They decide that they're going to have to come back, and they're going to have to come back into Tennessee. So they start amassing in Decatur, Alabama. They leave Decatur, Alabama to come back into Middle Tennessee, and they use 5 different paths to get up there. The path that Patrick Cleburne did comes straight through my hometown of Mount Pleasant. This road that is in front of my house started out as what was called a military road. A man by the name of Andy Jackson come through here in 1813 and 14, and he was headed down to a place called New Orleans to fight the British. So he come through here. Then it ended up becoming Route 6. Then it ended up becoming Highway 43. And then when they built the road around Mount Pleasant, as they do so much now, they built a bypass around the town. It's become Highway 243. And my house was built on that road, but it was built in 1904, so it didn't witness any of that. But that road has witnessed federal armies coming through here. Don Carlos Buell brought 60,000 men down this road right in front of my house to go fight at Shiloh. All of these men were marching back and forth through here. Forrest was through here numerous times. He recruited on the square, or what is the square now. And the square was where the men of the Big Rays and anybody who come into the Army, that's where they were sworn in. The actual physical center of town was a block further south, but since that's where everybody mustered up after the war, that became the town center. So he comes by here 4 miles north of here. I told you about St. John's Church. They go on in to start going into Columbia, and they come across the Federals, and they start a big running fight, and they get the Federals caught there in Spring Hill as the Federals are trying to get back to Nashville. And they have I don't really know what to tell you other than it was an absolute debacle about what happened there at Spring Hill. The Rippavilla house is 150 yards from the road, and Confederates are camped out. They got, they're camped out there. They get 150 yards from the road, and entire Federal Army marches past them during the night. And you're talking the night of November 29th of 1864. I'm going to take a step back because there was an important thing that happened, well, 2 things that happened in the winter of 63. And when you're going, you had, first of all, 63 and 64, you had, well, some people never knew that this thing ever existed. And that was Cleburne's letter to arm the slaves. That letter, Irvin S. Buck talks quite a bit about it, that he had gotten kind of moody and he'd gotten kind of quiet, and he spent several weeks or working on this because, as he phrased it in the letter, that the South was facing a crisis, and the crisis of fewer men. And I just told you about what they were running into, because all this time with the Atlanta campaign, his men were constantly complaining, we don't lose a single fight, but we have to leave the field because there's more of them than us. And, if they would have armed the slaves, you're talking between 75,000 and 100,000 men. And that would have changed the outcome of the war. Now, Robert E. Lee ended up doing it in April of 65, but it was too late at that point. Cleburne wrote it. He talked to it with his men. Some of them were for it. Some of them were against it. Govan liked it. Lowry liked it. There were some of them that spoke out against it, but they went, signed it, sent the letter to the Confederate Congress, and to say that it was squelched and censored is a massive understatement. of it to be burned, including Cleburne's copy. And they censored each man, asking them and instructing them to never speak about it again. Well, there was one man that kept it, a Brenham, Benham, Benham. He kept his copy, and he kept it in his records. Now, when he passed, his family come across it, and they turned it over to the War Department. If it had not been for that, nobody would even know that Pat Cleburne wanted that. He wrote of the need for it. And, of course, then you talk about that side of him. Now let's talk about what happened they went into winter quarters there around Tunnel Hill. And he is the only Confederate general that I'm aware of that was captured, released, captured, and released. Okay. Lucius Polk and Pat Cleburne. Lucius Polk was under Cleburne. And Lucius Polk and some other men were going to get into a big snowball fight. And since Lucius Polk was sick, Pat Cleburne took his spot in this snowball fight. Okay. He got captured. Of course, they were talking about what they were going to do to him, that they were going to dunk him, which was to, dunk him in the creek. But they said, no, since we capture you, just go back to your tent. Don't join the fight anymore. Oh, Pat couldn't stand it. Next thing you know, he's back out there. And this time they run him all the way to his tent. They go into the tent and they get him and they bring him out and they're dunking him in the snow. But then they released him again. But this time, the third time, he did not go back. But that tells you of the nature of this, because he knew what his men were going through during that time. He knew that there was a big depression that had set into his men, because his men, they were stopping every charge. And every charge they made, they succeeded. But at the end of the day, they had to leave the field. And this big depression had settled in on his men. And he knew that that was something that they needed to get out of. So he participated. And that tells you of the man himself right there and the human nature of this man. Okay. So I was talking about Spring Hill, that debacle that happened there in Spring Hill. John Bell Hood was in charge of the Confederate Army. Well, I almost said Federal Army, and he might as well have been. But he was in charge of the Confederate Army, and he had made orders, but he had gone, and he was staying at a home that was a few miles from there. And the bed that he slept on that night is on display in the National Confederate Museum. But those men come by. Next morning, they figure out what's happened. They start in pursuit. Benjamin Franklin Cheatham, General B.F. Cheatham, Pat Cleburne were having conversations. Lowry was in part of it. All of these men were having conversations because Hood had let it be known that he was going to blame Pat Cleburne, because he had told Pat to move. And Adam's right, the name of the house is Oaklawn. He had told Pat Cleburne to move when the men immediately to his left moved. Those men never moved. So Pat Cleburne never moved. He followed orders. What did you expect him to do? But Hood definitely wasn't going to take blame. So he was trying to see who was going to saddle. And when Cleburne found out that he was going to be blamed, he got very, very angry. So the conversation ends up getting broke up because he's told that he needs to get to the front of the line because he's got to get somewhere. So they get to the Harrison house. Now, the Harrison house, yes, Harrison, is on the south side of Winstead Hill. There is a painting that is there, and it is Pat Cleburne on his horse talking to Nathan Bedford Forrest. And that is painted there in front of the Harrison House. But you get to the top of Winstead Hill, which is owned by Sam Davis Camp 1293. So, Confederates own the top of the hill. And you think of Highway 31 going in, you're looking 2.5 miles before you get to the earthworks and nearly 3 miles before you get to the Carter House. You're looking at, on the far right, going nearly a mile all the way over to the golf course. The Harpeth River, there's a golf course through there. It used to be called Forest Crossing. When everything come out against Confederates, it was just changed the name to the Crossing. But on the golf course was where Forrest kept crossing the Harpeth River. And, he'd made several pinches into the back there, and he was telling them, okay, we can get them from the sides and get them into the back. And then you're looking off to your left, and it's nearly a mile in this direction, not quite that long. So the line's not really a 2-mile long line. It's a little bit shorter than that. But they step off somewhere around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Cleburne had lined his men up one behind the other because at that point, all that could reach them was artillery fire. So they're marching from Winstead Hill all the way to the Carter House. Artillery can reach them. So they're walking against over 2 miles against artillery. They get nearly the 2.5 miles to the first set of federal earthworks. And there's just hastily put out there, and it's considered out there in no man's land. And the men scream, let's just roll them into the trenches. So they bust through that first set, and they're pushing them all the way back to the main federal line. And if you go to the Carter House today, you can see with those artillery pieces, that's the actual line, battle line that was right there. And you will see a spot that is marked, and that's where the infantry was. The infantry was entrenched in. The artillery barrels were coming out over their head. They were up against the wheels. Now, when I first saw that, I'm going, okay, I don't know about that, because if you've ever live fired, the artillery piece rose back. And your first command is back in battery, where you push it back up to where you can fire it again. How do you feel about all of that going on and it's above your head, What if you had a shell explode or blow up a barrel or something like that? But I want to take one brief step back to something that happened on top of Winstead Hill. And Pat Cleburne walked up, and he had sat down on the ground, and there was a stump, and he took his field glasses and put his elbows on the stump, and he looked out, and he said, this is going to be rough. They are dug in. This is a formidable, this is going to be a rough charge. And Irvin S. Buck says that he writes in his book, and he tucks it back in his coat. And as he's getting his men ready to march off, and I think it's actually Govan that comes up to him and goes, this is a suicide. And he said, and Pat Cleburne goes, because this is a suicide charge. You're going 2.5 miles, nearly 3 miles, wide open territory. And it is wide open, because when you're there, there's a group of Osage orange trees that's off to the right, or bodock trees, if you want to call them that. But they're Osage orange. And there's not anything until you get to that group of trees that's right there around the Carter House. There's nothing. This is all farmland. So they're just marching across a wide open field. And Cleburne goes, if we're going to die today, let's die like men. So they get there and they roll up these earthworks, and they're fighting right there. The line's been broke a time or two. You have the story of the Confederate flag bearer that sees them loading the cannon, and he runs, and he's going to use the staff of the flag and spike the gun that way. And as he's in the air coming over the earthworks to jam the gun, they touch it off. And this young man turns into a red mist. And that's what the Federals call it. He turns into a red mist. and they're fighting there, and you have horses that are dying going over the earthworks, and there's men that are dying on top of the earthworks, and the Federals are pulling some of them over, because they've got to keep the fight going. And Cleburne's about 30 to 50 yards from the Federal line. He's on horseback. An artillery shell comes through the horse, knocks Cleburne and the horse down on the ground. Horse is dead. A aide rides up, a subordinate rides up. Cleburne's coming out from under the horse. He gets on that horse, and as he's throwing his leg over the saddle, an artillery shell comes through that horse. In just a minute, 2 minutes time, had two horses shot out from under him by an artillery range of less than 50 yards. Irvin S. Buck was one of the men that saw him last. And he said that Patrick Cleburne was standing on the ground, kepi in one hand, sword in the other hand, screaming, waving, rallying his men. And when his men got around to him, he turned and he disappeared into the smoke. The night continues on, the battle ends, but no sign of Pat. And his men start wondering about him, and they start looking for him. And shortly before daylight, they find him. He's about 30 yards from the Federal line. He had been given a brand new gray uniform. The bottom three buttons on his vest were not buttoned, and there was a single bullet wound on the left side. He had been shot by a mini ball. Sometime during the night, somebody stole his boots. They had taken his kepi and covered his eyes with it. Almost like they couldn't stand the thought of Cleburne watching them steal his boots. His overcoat got gone. What would we give to know what he wrote down in that book that he wrote 2 hours before, maybe? He had written in there. What would we give to have something like that? And what this man's thought was. The Cleburne kepi, he kept his kepi. He didn't replace it. That belongs to the Tennessee State Museum. The Tennessee Division Sons of Confederate Veterans raised money to conserve that kepi. And they know from, the forensics that they have to do to restore it. This was here, that was there, the sweat, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I've been blessed to see it. And it's almost one of these holy experiences, especially coming from somebody who drives past where he was laid to rest for a little while. They called the wagon over. He was laid on the wagon right beside General Adams, who was also killed. There were 5 that got killed during the battle. There was one more, a John Carter, a General John Carter. He died on December 4th, and he is buried in Rose Hill Cemetery. And I'll talk about Rose Hill Cemetery here in a moment. They went and he laid on the porch at the Carton House. And then in just a little while, they took him to Columbia, and they buried Cleburne there in Rose Hill Cemetery. And Rose Hill Cemetery, like I said, John Carter is buried there. There's a Confederate section there. We don't know exactly where Cleburne was interred. He was there less than a week because it come up what he had said at St. John's Church. So they disinterred him there. in Rose Hill, and they took him to St. John's Church, and they buried him there, right beside Granberry and Straw. The three of them were buried there. All three have now been come and claimed by family or their adopted homes, and Cleburne stayed there until 1870. And you had the Ladies Memorial Association, and you had the Patrick Cleburne Society, something similar to that. They had they wanted to bring him to Helena, and they disinterred him in 1870 there at St. John's Church, and he made the trip across Tennessee, and he was on a steamship that was in Memphis to go upriver to Helena. Jefferson Davis was there. They said several Confederate generals that lived in Memphis. One of them we know was Nathan Bedford Forrest. Isham Harris, he was the elected governor of Tennessee during the war. He was there. They were on the ship with the coffin, and this Irishman come up, and he asked for permission to pray over his commander. They said all they did was Jeff Davis just nodded yes. And they said this big Irishman come up, went to his knees, head on the coffin, praying. He was crying. The men around him were crying. And he was praying and making all of the signs. And if you want to see old Pat now, you got to go to Helena, Arkansas. And does anybody have any questions about old Pat? I'll go ahead and I'll tell you one of his, he went by Ronan. His family called him Ronan. His name was Patrick Ronan Cleburne. And it was named after his mother. It was his mother's maiden name. And it had been spelled multiple times itself. Ronin, Ronan, Ronane. You know, very prominent family. So much so that she has royalty in her family. She had an ancestor that was killed by Macbeth. So she was an extremely prominent family herself. She was a descendant of royalty. His daddy was a descendant of knights. Nobody knew this about Patrick Cleburne. He never talked about it. He never bragged about it. There's so many people that would, guess who I'm descendant of? Not him. Not him. He was never the one to talk about that. He believed a man earned his own way. And that tells you of the character of the man, because he did earn his own way. And November the 30th of 1864, in his adopted country that he believed in, fighting for the belief that he believed in. Not the guy's a hero. I mean, there was no backing down. There was none of that. And it showed how people treated him. You know, that big Irishman just, on his knees, head on the coffin, praying, crying. And you got a Confederate president and the elected governor and Confederate generals standing around. And everybody's very quiet and everybody's gotten very emotional. He was a very, very special man. And he is the kind of man that scares and terrifies a whole lot of people, because he's not going to back up. There is no quit to the man. You can't buy him. He's just the highest character that you can be. And I'll finish this one little thing. Patrick Cleburne did take one leave during the Army, during the war. He went to Mobile, Alabama, to be the best man for another general. While he was there, he met a young lady named Sarah Tarleton, Saratarleton, and they got engaged. So then I'll talk briefly about what happened in their Tullahoma campaign around War Trace. There was news that had come out that they were going to replace all of the flags out there. But those men did not want to give up that Hardee flag. And they protested. And they asked to keep it. And they were allowed to keep it. The caveat with that was this. When the Federals were looking out across and they saw First Nationals, Second Nationals, and battles. But what about when they saw that Hardee? They knew where those Arkansas boys were. And that was where they would focus a lot of their attack. Because if they attacked, they had to attack there with a very large, powerful force because they were going up against men who knew how to fight. Thank everybody for listening. Hopefully this wasn't too boring. List some of your favorite books about Patrick Cleburne. The one written by Irvin S. Buck. Then there's another one that is called Patrick Cleburne, Confederate General. P-U-R-D-U-E. There was a husband and wife that wrote that. That was their last name, P-U-R-D-U-E. And it's just called Patrick Cleburne, Confederate General. Those are two very good ones. With the one that is Patrick Cleburne, Confederate General, it gets a whole lot into what made Pat who he was and about all of his ancestral history. And you'll read about Macbeth and all of that. And Kenny Ramsey is talking about Captain Christopher Stewart Cleburne. Okay. Christopher Stewart Cleburne was 11, nearly 12 years younger than Patrick because Patrick was 18 months old when his mother died and Patrick's dad remarried. So Christopher was the half brother, but him and Pat got along wonderful. Christopher and Pat got along wonderful. So when the war started, Christopher was already over here. When the war started, he was a very good horseman. Pat Cleburne introduced him to a man by the name of John Hunt Morgan. And he fought as a captain because he became very proud of him. And John Hunt Morgan really liked him. And he got killed May 10th of 64 at the Cloyd's farm. And Pat did know about that, and he took it very hard. And then somebody mentioned on here that he's called the Stonewall Jackson of the West. And yes, he was called that during that time. He earned that moniker because he always stood there, always stood his grounds.
Whew. I wanted a history lesson about Patrick Cleburne. I'm going to Patrick Cleburne. Thank you. I'm struggling, obviously.
Yes.
We spent like 15 minutes talking about the pronunciation and how to spell it, and I still can't pronounce it or spell it.
And but it doesn't matter because I've talked to them and they all answered all of it. So,
but I have been wanting to know more about him for quite a while. I just haven't had time to open a book. Hence why I ask everybody some books for everybody to read who are interested about this great man. Because again, when we picked out that quote for the T-shirt is when I fell in love. I was like, man, I have to know more about Patrick because that quote hits me hard, especially today when people have told me to walk away from my Confederate heritage, to turn my back on all this. And here is a general. I'm with the South, and victory or death.
Yes. Yes.
And that's how I feel about honoring these men. Because I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it because men like Patrick Cleburne are just great men in history that need to be learned from and studied, respected, and honored.
Yeah.
And I cannot thank Jason enough for coming on tonight and doing this fantastic talk. Jason made it sound like he had a talk. He didn't tell me he was going to bring the house down. He was like, I got some. I can throw something together.
Yeah, I can talk about him.
I can maybe give you 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. I mean, just something to
well,
something
I
on
felt
St. Patrick's Day.
I felt bad. I really did. I spoke at the Highland Brigade Patrick Cleburne St. Patrick's Day dinner on Saturday. And as we were leaving, I kind of got the feeling that I was going long, and I need to go hurry up and write this. And there was, and there's even with this stuff, there's stuff I left out, and it's just because to talk about a man of this nature, this could go for a while. So and I'll finish up and I'm coming home with Linda and I say, I feel bad that I went that long, I was wanting to cut it off at about 30 to 40 minutes and I hated to go to 45 and she goes, no, you did an hour. And I felt about that tall because it just, when you start talking about these men of these characters, these men, it's just, and your ancestor was that way. We're talking about, Pat Cleburne because he was the general. What could we do if we had more information on the men that fought underneath him? And they were writing, and they wrote diaries, and they wrote all of that. But when they, you get the big picture with Cleburne. But can you imagine what these men were going through when they were fighting in and around Atlanta and at Chickamauga and all of this, and and that was your ancestor. And they were all that way. So when you think about and you read about Pat and you think about the men that were underneath him, it was the same with Stonewall Jackson, with the Stonewall Jackson and Stonewall Jackson of the West. It was the same thing. When you can't talk about them without talking about their men. And it's just the same thing. We can talk about God all day and never talk about the Confederate soldier. But you're not going to talk about the Confederate soldier very long without talking about God. Amen. Because that was, even with Pat Cleburne, it was that way. And these are just excellent, great men. And, the beauty of this is we get to talk about them.
And learn so much about them. And I don't even know how it's possible to respect these men even more. But every time I hear one of these stories, it blows my mind just how great these men were.
Yes.
Truly the pillars of the Southern community, I would even say. Yes. Just great men. And I'm so happy that you came on, Commander, to tell us all about him, teach us a bit of history, and maybe, just maybe, we can all start being a bit more like Patrick.
Well, what if we all were?
Amen.
What if we all had Cleburne, Forrest, Lee, Jackson, all rolling through our veins? Oh, wait a minute. We do. So why don't we just do what they did? They were honestly great men. And I just thought Pat Cleburne was a broke, poor Irishman until I started studying. I go, he come from this, he come from that, because he never told anybody. He made his own way. Definitely a great man of character. Oh. And I think in many times he has been greatly underappreciated for the kind of person that he was.
I'll agree with that.
Yes.
And hopefully in the near future, we'll have another episode on Patrick, because, I mean, golly, how can we not?
Yeah.
And I ask that everybody please share this episode out so we can get it out to as many people as possible. Thank Commander Boshers for coming on and giving this excellent program.
It was my honor.
And make sure you're wearing green. I know it's, 9 or 10 at most of our viewers, even later for some of our other viewers across the world. But, maybe wear some green tomorrow too, in honor of this great man and his heritage, which is now our heritage.
Yes.
So again, make sure to share this episode out and email scvyouthOutreach@gmail.com, and you'll be featured on this week's Look Around the Confederation this Thursday at 7 p.m. Confederate Standard Time. There will be one this Thursday. Me and Commander Boshers we both got confused on our schedules, with both of us somehow volunteering for the same Thursday that neither of us could do. I don't know how we managed it. Yeah. But I had my camp meeting. He was doing some business.
With the camp.
Yeah. So I looked up and I was like, ain't nobody to host today. But I can tell you, my camp had an excellent meeting. But make sure to tune in this Thursday. We're going to catch up on the news from last week. And, of course, this week, we are going to be getting a look around back on a more regularly scheduled program now. Yeah. We apologize for that. It was a weird start this year to the poor program, but that show will be getting back on track. And, of course, make sure to tune in next Monday as we have Past Commander-in-Chief Larry McClooney on to talk about Beauregard and Fort Sumter. So it's going to be a great episode with him. I'm looking forward to it. And then after that episode, the last Monday of the month is Hearth and Home, where we have Executive Director Adam Southern come on to give you an update about your museum and your HQ. And, of course, we're about to be in April, so get ready for a lot of great things coming out of SCV Chat in April. We just started putting things in stone today about shows, videos, and so much more we cannot wait to do. You don't be shocked if this is done as a rerun in April because of how great the episode was. So make sure to do all that, and we will see y'all this Thursday. And remember, chat heads, no fumar in the elevator. Good night, everybody.
Rudder frop.
Rudder frop.